Today, I want to talk about a company so massive I guarantee you use one of its products. AI, cloud computing, and even video games, this tech titan made even having a computer in your house a reality, and stood at the very foundation of the internet. That's right, today we're talking about Microsoft. Hey everybody, and welcome back to Dollars and Cents, helping you make sense of making dollars. In 1972, Bill Gates and Paul Allen founded Trafo Data, building and selling computers that collected driver data. Eventually, Allen came up with the idea to construct an interpreter for the programming language BASIC. With this new device, Gates and Allen pitched it to MITS for the Altair 8800. MITS agreed to distribute the system with their microcomputers in 1975, a major win for Gates and Allen. Trafo Data needed a name change for their new microcomputer software business, and thus the name Microsoft was born. Until 1980, Microsoft made a variety of operating systems, but that all changed when they created the revolutionary MS-DOS. It led to a partnership with the computer titan IBM, ultimately solidifying Microsoft as a major player in the emerging internet space. Then, in 1985, Microsoft released a graphical extension for MS-DOS that we all know and love today, Microsoft Windows. In that same year, Microsoft released the very first version of Internet Explorer, launching the world into the digital space. All these advancements led to Microsoft going public in 1986 at $21 a share. Since then, it's an understatement to say that Microsoft has titanically grown. The company has released 10 major versions of Microsoft Windows, with an 11th on the way. And don't forget industry standard Microsoft Office. The company has ventured far beyond its roots in computer operating systems, expanding into the cloud space with Microsoft Azure, the game system space with Xbox, and the gaming production space with its acquisition of ZeniMax. Needless to say, we could do an entire video just explaining everything Microsoft does, but now it's time to get into the grit of it, the financial health of this tech behemoth. Up first is, of course, revenue growth. In 2016, Microsoft brought in a humble $91.1 billion. By the end of 2020, that number jumped to a whopping $168.1 billion. We can attribute much of this growth to the events of 2020, but still impressive growth nonetheless. Second up is shares outstanding. Microsoft is buying back shares. In 2016, the company had 7.84 billion shares outstanding. Now it has 7.53 billion, so a solid 3.5% decline. The third thing to look at is free cash flow growth. In 2016, Microsoft brought in nearly $25 billion, but reported in 2020 $56.1 billion in free cash flow, a literal double. Next on the list is current assets versus current liabilities, and given that Microsoft is a tech company, I expect it to be, well, impressive. Microsoft has $184.4 billion in current assets against $88.66 billion in current liabilities. This comes with $130.3 billion in cash. Having $130 billion in cash is like Berkshire Hathaway levels of cash. Impressive it is. Following that, we look at the free cash flow valuation. If we take the free cash flow average of the last 5 years and multiply it by 20, we get an expected market cap of $813 billion. Currently, Microsoft is trading at $2.25 trillion. I expect the company to be overvalued since this is a fairly common theme among the high-flying tech stocks, but still, it's a big number. Now, let's take a look at Microsoft's return on invested capital. The company has an incredible 5-year ROIC of 17.1%, way over our 10% goal, and to hammer the point home, just to look at last year's ROIC, 23.6%. Last on the list is dividends. Microsoft's dividend percentage is a fairly low 0.7%, equating to 62 cents per quarter for $2.48 per share per year. Microsoft's payout ratio, though, is a healthy 28.2%, so it has a lot of room to grow that dividend, and it has consistently grown its dividend by 9.2% per year for 11 consecutive years. Solid, though though Microsoft doesn't pay a lot. As expected of an enormous company like this, Microsoft has an excellent balance sheet, financially healthy, albeit a little overvalued. Now, let's look at what Microsoft is up to. There are a great many services that Microsoft now offers through a subscription model. Things like Xbox Game Pass, Office 365, and even their cloud platform Azure. Since changing to this subscription model, Microsoft has seen impressive growth in all of these areas and more. Xbox's revenue is up by 40%, Office 365's is up by 28%, even Azure's revenue is up by 50%. And remember, all of these are comparing to 2020 and the crazy year that was. Let's actually take a minute here to talk about Azure since I've mentioned it. While Azure is relatively small, it's already a hugely important part of Microsoft's overall business. It's also probably where Microsoft will see most of its future growth. Falling under Microsoft's Intelligent Cloud section, Azure is essentially a collection of cloud-based computing services. Back up your files using one of Microsoft's over 40 data centers or host web applications. You can do almost anything with Azure. Newer services falling under this include Internet of Things device management systems, AI, and machine learning capabilities. In terms of market share, Azure currently sits at number 2, having a sizable 19% of the total market share. Currently, the cloud computing space is a hyper-competitive business, with Amazon's AWS dominating the market at an impressive 32% of the total market share. This lead, though, has slipped in the past few years, and while AWS commands more customers, Microsoft has customers with deeper pockets. Azure reports that 95% of Fortune 500 company offices use its services, lending large credibility for Azure as a platform. Speaking of offices, let's talk about another huge aspect of Microsoft's business that's undergone significant changes since its debut: Microsoft 365. Whether you use Word, Excel, PowerPoint, or Teams, it's likely you've encountered or used at least one of the many services provided under this program. Microsoft 365 has been extremely lucrative, bringing in an impressive $41.7 billion of Microsoft's revenue in 2020. Combine this with Azure's revenue of $12 billion, and I believe these two services will provide the bulk of Microsoft's future growth. Even though we know that Windows 10 is set to debut next month, I don't want to speculate on how it fits in with these or with Microsoft's growth story, but it's certainly good to see just how much Azure and Microsoft 365 bring in. The other part of Microsoft's growth story is their seemingly incredible ability to make really smart acquisitions. Now, it's no secret that big companies make lots of acquisitions, and Microsoft is the same. In 2016, it purchased LinkedIn. Then in 2018, it bought GitHub, and jumped to 2020, and Microsoft buys ZeniMax. And these are just a few. Microsoft got Skype at its height in 2011, then Mojang in 2014, and game developers Havok in 2015. A lot of these acquisitions have worked out nicely, adding to Microsoft's portfolio in games and services. Remember how we said Microsoft 365 is more than Word and PowerPoint now? Well, the company now offers a lot of integrations with LinkedIn and Skype as well. It's allowed Microsoft to interconnect many of its platforms to maximize user experience, and really showed Microsoft's impressive growth. But is it possible to grow too much and become too big? Maybe. The government may just seem to think so. Microsoft is no stranger to government intervention. In 1999, a judge found that Microsoft engaged in monopolistic business practices. This could have been a huge hit to the company back then, had Microsoft not wormed its way to nothing but a minor slap on the wrist for bad business behavior. And the company seemingly learned from this event, operating a lot more behind the scenes now, leading one journalist to call Microsoft the invisible tech behemoth. With so many antitrust cases and monopoly lawsuits laid against Google, Apple, and Facebook in recent years, Microsoft has been noticeably absent from the legal fun. Though it has been absent from this, the looming danger of government intervention gets bigger every year that Microsoft does. Worse than that though, a problem that could lead to the downfall of Microsoft is Microsoft. Being so massive, it competes in so many areas. The tech giant just doesn't have one competitor, it has dozens. In its investor presentation, Microsoft listed companies like Apple, Cisco, IBM, Facebook, Slack, and Zoom all as potential threats. And really, one of those in particular is a spot-on example. IBM sat on top of the tech world for nearly a century as more competitors flooded the personal computing space in the 1980s, creating smaller and stronger computers. IBM fell behind, losing both market share and revenue. Today, IBM is a shell of its former self. Once overstretched over many areas, it started shedding excess divisions for years. And is it possible for Microsoft, as big as it is with all of its many branches, to fall like IBM did? Well, I think so, and Microsoft should take IBM as a warning of what could happen to them. I do understand that Microsoft is not IBM, and it's not exactly an apples-to-apples comparison, but I do believe that demonstrates that any company, not just Microsoft, is capable of falling like IBM. If such a massive company does not continue to innovate, adapt, and generate in this fast-paced world of tech, Microsoft's story could end up eerily similar to that of IBM's. And that leads us to just one more thing. Am I buying Microsoft? Simply put, no. While I love the prospects for Microsoft's business, I don't love its current valuation. I probably won't be a buyer until its share price drops to the $110 range. Plus, there are plenty of alternatives in the market right now. Microsoft just isn't the right fit for me and my portfolio right now. All that said, Microsoft has been a leader in tech for decades. I'm sure Gates and Allen couldn't fathom the growth Microsoft would see in its story, and really, I believe the company will continue to be a leader in the future, just as great as it has been. Well, that's all I've got for you in this video about Microsoft. What do you think Microsoft's future looks like? Leave your thoughts on the tech behemoth in the comments below or hop onto my Discord, link in the description. Until next time, I will see all of you in the next episode of Dollars and Cents.